From Detroit's Cass Corridor, it's the Metro on WDET. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robyn Vincent. Today's news is heavy. Headlines filled with airstrikes, politics, and policy. But underneath all of that are people choosing to act, to protest, to vote, to create.
That's where we begin today. A Metro Detroit attorney boards a ship carrying aid to Gaza. We'll hear her account of being detained by Israeli forces and what compels her to return again and again.
Then, Detroit's mayoral race moves into its defining weeks. The Michigan Chronicle has covered nearly every election this city has ever seen. And this year, its executive editor says something feels different.
Also, Michigan's county clerks weigh in on ranked choice voting. They're warning that reform can come with its own red tape.
And later, the sound of hope in verse and in rhythm. Inside Out Literary Arts celebrates 3 decades of turning Detroit classrooms into poetry workshops.
And a new black box theater opens its doors at U of D Mercy. And Don Was teams up with Don Gagne, 2 Detroit boys, to chart a new groove for the Motor City. This is the Metro.
We begin in Gaza, where a ceasefire is barely holding. Israeli airstrikes resumed over the weekend after reports of new clashes. Both sides accuse the other of breaking the truce. Meanwhile, people in Gaza face hunger, disease, and displacement as Israel continues to block or delay aid. Those barriers to aid are among the reasons Michigan attorney Huwaida Arraf went back to sea. She was part of a flotilla carrying aid to Gaza until Israel intercepted the ships on October 8th. She says she was beaten, zip-tied, and forcibly detained. But she describes her ordeal as minor compared to what Palestinians are facing. Arraf joined me to discuss the cost of bearing witness. I began by asking her about the moment Israeli forces intercepted the flotilla.
You know, unfortunately, it's not my first time being on a flotilla. And the point of the flotilla is to break an unlawful and deadly siege. And we focus on trying to get to Gaza by mobilizing international civil society to pressure our governments to force Israel not to attack us because we are sailing lawfully. So I was on this vessel with 92 civilians and many of them, dozens of medics and journalists. The medics bringing with them their medicines that Israel prevents from getting into Gaza. And we were just also determined on getting to Gaza. When I realized it wasn't just a moment, because the Israeli Navy started threatening us over the radio. I was one of the people in charge of this whole mission, so I was in the wheelhouse with the captain, and I was responding to the Israeli Navy saying, stop threatening our vessel. We are civilians, we have elderly, we have parliamentarians, we have doctors, we have journalists, and we are sailing lawfully. But at that moment, I knew that they were not going to turn back. And so I went outside the wheelhouse and I could see helicopters up above and soldiers rappelling onto the top deck of the vessel and training their guns on me, who was obviously unarmed. There was a journalist with me, and there were all of these other civilians who had started our emergency procedure. I mean, we called them over the radio saying, we're being attacked. So they all donned their life jackets, all put their hands up, and soldiers just took over the whole vessel.
Huwaida, you've spoken of Israeli officers pulling your kufiya, twisting your arms, ordering you onto your knees. In that moment of physical confrontation, what were you weighing before complying or resisting?
So when the Israeli soldiers, it was the Navy, one of their most elite naval commando forces, dozens and dozens, took over our vessel. They had us held at gunpoint for hours while they steered our vessel into an Israeli port. So we were effectively taken hostage from international waters, and we were taken against our will. But we didn't know what time it was or anything because they take our things from us. It must have been at least 10, maybe more hours that we were held kind of at gunpoint, and we were sailing. We arrived into the Israeli port at night, and the soldiers were demanding that anyone who had anything, any symbol of, Palestinian solidarity, any T-shirt on that represented anything to do with Palestinian rights, that people take it off. And I said, I'm not taking it off. I had a shirt on that said, "For the children of Gaza." I'm like, why do these words scare you? And I'm not taking it off, and I'm not taking my keffiyeh off. I was walked off the vessel, but as soon as I stepped onto the pavement, Israeli police, so not soldiers at this point, it was police, just attacked me. I didn't even know where it was coming from. I mean, one grabbed my hair, the other one was twisting my arm. They went for my keffiyeh that was tied around my waist, and my arm also went there just because they were grabbing at me. So I was thrown to the floor, and as they were trying to loosen my arm, were kicking me in the chest. And at some point, they picked me up by my hair and were walking me forcefully, but with my head down, like I was almost tripping over myself. The pace that they were walking me with my head almost to the floor, and then threw me down again when we got into this building, and were pressing me, like my head to the floor. I said, I can't breathe. And they said, well, if you want to breathe, then get on your knees. I said, I'm not going to get on my knees. At one point, I started screaming out, I can't breathe. They relented a bit. They had cuffed me also with these zip ties as tight as they could possibly get them. I felt immediately my hands swelling. They eventually took those off, and I had a hard time, as tight as they were on, cutting those off of me. But they made me strip my shirts. We were out of the eyes of any kind of media. They could be as violent with us as they were going to. There is no point, in a sense, in resisting. At that point, I just want them to know, not even with my words, just with my demeanor, that I know that what we are doing, like, we are in the right. And I almost feel sorry for you that you have to be this violent, that any symbol of Palestinian rights scares you, and that you are being this violent with unarmed civilians, with medics, with journalists. I'm a human rights attorney. And so I don't even have to say it. I just kind of sit there and look at them and don't let them faze me, is what I could do at that point. It is unnecessarily violent. It is absolutely scary. But for me, I know, and it's one of the things I told everybody else as we're going into this, and we know that we are going to be potentially abused physically, mentally. Our ordeal will eventually end. It'll be a few days, maybe a couple of weeks. But let's remember why we're doing this. Let's remember why we're doing this, why we have to be out in the sea in the first place. I was held in Israeli captivity for 5 days. Palestinians could be months, years, or a lifetime on end, and not only suffering like the abuse that I went through, but much, much worse in terms of actual torture and sexual torture, degrading treatment, and they don't have the same kind of network of advocacy. Like, I'm an American citizen, although the U.S. really didn't do anything for me. I was in Israeli captivity for 5 days. I did not get so much as a phone call from an American consulate or from the embassy. But I do have, or at least know I have, some kinds of rights as an American citizen, which Palestinians don't have.
What I'm hearing from you, Huwaida, is that this is how you prepare yourself to do this kind of work, to do this kind of activism. You compartmentalize. You tell yourself that what you're potentially going to experience is very short-term pain and discomfort, and that's something that you can stomach when you think about the broader suffering of Palestinians. I want to go back to something you said, which is that there was no communication from the U.S. In international norms, the U.S. consular role is to check on detained citizens. And so during your detention, you had 0 U.S. officials reach out, press for access, or even acknowledge you. Is that right?
Correct.
So how did their absence influence the dynamics of your confinement?
Well, there are two things here. There's consular services, which the U.S., every government is obligated to provide to their civilians. And the U.S. has been just failing in this realm. Not just this time, but a couple months earlier, I was on another boat that was attacked by Israeli forces. And we were only 21 civilians on that boat that sailed at the end of July. It was a boat that was dedicated to the children of Gaza. And we were trying to reach Gaza. We were carrying baby formula. You know, the images of the deliberate starvation of infants, of babies, trying to address that. And also, you know, the boat was also adorned with stuffed animals because we left from Italy, and a lot of children in Italy were coming to our boat and donating their stuffed animals to kids in Gaza. And we were really hoping that this one little boat might be able to reach Gaza and bring a little bit of relief or a little bit of joy. And, you know, in our advocacy, before we were attacked, we were calling on the 21 of us, 7 of us were American citizens. We issued a public call to the U.S. government, to President Trump. We said, we are on this boat sailing lawfully in international waters. We constitute no threat to Israel. We're carrying baby formula and teddy bears for children. Don't let Israel violate our rights. Not only do we not get a response, but it's this pattern of not just the United States, all of these other governments that allow Israel to violate not only the rights of Palestinians, but the rights of their own citizens simply because they don't do anything to hold Israel accountable. They're not sanctioning Israel. They're not threatening Israel. Do not do this to our citizens. A lot of European countries especially are better at providing consular services. Some consulates were actually at the port when our boats are taken into port. Or meet their citizens, taking them across the border, visiting them more than once, ensuring that they're doing okay as one can be under such circumstances. But the U.S. government not only is not there, like I said, not even a phone call, much less a visit. The previous time, just a couple of months ago, and this time, and if we would have that expressed not only concern, but actually a strong message to the Israeli government that we are behind our citizens, again, because we are not the ones violating the laws here, then I think that would greatly influence Israel's actions. Again, they feel that they can do this because they're never held accountable.
Now, Israel has cited security concerns and its blockade in Gaza as legal justification for intercepting aid vessels at sea. From your legal vantage, what statuses or precedents do you see as undermining that justification in this case?
Israel always uses this guise of or excuse of security for everything it does. And it is just digging a little deeper. One can easily debunk a lot of the things they say. I think we know, even in the way most media reports, they talk about what Israel's doing in the context of a war on Hamas, as opposed to it's not even a war, it's an attack on the entire Palestinian existence. But to answer your question specifically about this blockade, Israel imposed this blockade on Gaza. Israel has always controlled Gaza since 1967, since they occupied this territory. And Gaza is the size of Metro Detroit, with over 2 million people trapped in there, completely controlled by Israel. Nothing gets in and out without Israel permission. In 2006, they tightened the controls, so imposed this blockade, which was designed to punish the civilian population because Israel didn't like the outcome of Palestinian elections. That's collective punishment, which is not only illegal in international legal terms, that's a war crime. But our governments weren't doing anything back then to stop Israel, to say this is a war crime. We oppose this policy, and for our governments to actually be breaking the blockade themselves. So we started doing, and the first time I tried to sail to Gaza was actually in 2008. And it's sad that 17 years later we're still trying to do it, because now this blockade, which is a war crime, has become a tool of Israel's genocide. It is now, we see the deliberate starvation campaign cutting out completely, preventing aid trucks from getting in for weeks and months at a time.
17 years. That was the first time that you stepped foot on a flotilla to engage in a mission like this, a humanitarian mission like this. Even amid the destruction and suffering that we've been talking about today, I'm wondering what changes you've seen in those 17 years. Have any of them been positive? Are you noticing more of an appetite from the public, for example, to talk about this, or from the press to be more interested in the work that you've been doing as an activist and an advocate for human rights?
So when we started, the very first boat I was on was in 2008. It was we had two small fishing boats. It wasn't a huge flotilla. It was two small fishing boats. We were 44 civilians from like 17 different countries. And our point was to challenge this illegal blockade. Our boats really barely carried us across the Mediterranean. We didn't carry humanitarian aid. And while it's a humanitarian mission, because what's being done to Gaza and Palestinians as a whole is so inhumane, our goal is not only to bring in medical supplies or humanitarian aid. Sure, we stuff our boats with what we can carry, but not even 1,000 boats like ours is going to carry what Gaza needs, taking into consideration the scale of the devastation. And our point is larger than that. Palestinians don't want to live on humanitarian aid. Our cause is not a charity case. Palestinians, like all people, deserve their freedom. So this is about an illegal blockade, the need for it to end, and Palestinians being able to have their freedom to control what gets in and out, to be able to work, to feed their families, not live on humanitarian aid. But if you just look at the humanitarian aspect of it, we have basically a global order which has accepted or is enabling a country on trial for genocide. So Israel is on trial at the International Court of Justice for genocide, and all major human rights organizations have now come out and said that Israel is committing genocide. I have come to that conclusion. But they're allowed to decide what aid, if any at all, gets to a people that they are accused of genociding. Like, how is that acceptable? Looking at, if putting in another other context, would it be okay for Russia to decide if any humanitarian aid can get to the Ukraine, or to decide completely what gets in and out of Ukraine, or take any other context? But that's what the world has accepted here. And that, just on a humanitarian aspect, is so repulsive. How can we accept this? And this is why we're saying our government should not be allowing Israel to do this. And we see that whenever Israel wants to tighten the pressure on Palestinians, they don't let in one aid truck. And this is at a time when there has been unprecedented devastation, and Palestinians need at least 600 aid trucks per day to meet the basic level of subsistence to the devastated and traumatized people. And every day that's not being met, people are dying, children are dying, and we know that children and the most vulnerable, the elderly, the sick, they are the most heavily impacted. And we're allowing this to continue, not just by the United States not sanctioning Israel, but continuing to send Israel so much of our tax dollars, billions of American tax dollars, and then proceeding to also protect Israel diplomatically on an international level, vetoing any UN Security Council resolution that aims to hold Israel accountable. And so there is this, when you ask about the change, I think this level of over the years, Israel having this uncritical support from the United States, billions of our tax dollars flowing to Israel, and no accountability, has allowed Israel to just become all the more violent. And now we are at the stage of a full live stream genocide, and Israel doesn't care because it has never been held accountable. So why not do what it wants? But on a civil society, global civilians, that level, there is so much more awareness because of social media and other factors. People are able to bypass traditional media and explore and see for themselves what is happening. That has woken up a lot of people, and people are outraged and horrified and taking to the streets in hundreds of thousands and millions. And I think that is having an impact. Of course, not fast enough. I think we are going to look back at this time in 10, 20 years and think, how did we let this happen? But it also has to be, I see this as more than just being about Palestine. We have an international legal order that is being trampled upon. We have human rights laws that are being torn to shreds. And so what Israel is doing with the aid of the United States and some Western countries that also continue to support Israel, they're basically trying to say that there is no international law, there are no human rights protections, it's brutality and military might is right, and that is a world in which no one is safe. Going on this flotilla, I missed my daughter's birthday. She just turned 11, and she was so devastated. She was crying before I left, and I just said, I know you're sad and maybe very mad at Mom for not being there, but I see this as really a birthday gift to you, because I can't see passing along to you a world where this is allowed to happen, and we have to do all we can to try to change it.
What does that mean for people here in Metro Detroit doing all that you can to try and change things?
I think that there is a role for everyone to play. We have to realize that in order to change things, a genocide is being committed on our watch in our lifetime. And I know this might sound a little bit cliche-ish, but I think every one of us at some point questioned what would we have done if we were alive during the Nazi Holocaust or the anti-apartheid movement for the younger people or the civil rights movement. What would have been my role? And now we are faced with the most, I think, severe issue of deprivation of rights in our lifetime. It is the most consequential. It is a brutality unmatched, like nothing I've ever seen before. And really, like I said, a live stream genocide. And we can see it. It's not hidden from anyone's view. What are you doing about it? Not everybody has to be on a boat, sailing to Gaza. Not everyone has to be on a flotilla. Not everybody has to be at the front of a demonstration. But everybody has a role to play. And one of the most important things you can do without even leaving your house is to let your elected representatives know that you oppose your tax dollars being sent to Israel, because it is our members of Congress that consistently vote to send our hard-earned tax dollars to the Israeli military and government, allowing it to commit these crimes. And that not only do we not want our money going to commit a genocide, but that money could be better and needs to be better spent in our communities here.
Huwaida Arraf is a human rights attorney based in Metro Detroit. She's led multiple humanitarian missions at sea in the name of Palestinian sovereignty. A couple notes from this conversation. Some experts on international law have said Israel's interception of the flotilla missions is illegal, given the flotillas have been intercepted in international waters. Israel argues it has a maritime blockade that prohibits foreign vessels from entering Gaza. Arraf spoke of the Israeli torture of Palestinians. There are documented accounts of this from media and human rights organizations. The Israeli human rights group B'Tselem just issued a new report detailing the abuse of Palestinians held in Israeli custody. The report is called Welcome to Hell: The Israeli Prison System as Network of Torture Camps. Now, Arraf also mentioned that Israel is on trial for genocide at the International Court of Justice. South Africa launched that case against Israel at the end of 2023. Other countries have since joined South Africa in alleging Israel is committing genocide, including Spain, Brazil, Mexico, Ireland, and Turkey. Israel has denied the claim. The American government also rejects it. It will likely be years before the International Court of Justice delivers its final ruling. The court has found Israel's occupation of Palestine unlawful. This is The Metro on WDET. Up next, we'll talk about Detroit's mayoral election with the executive editor of Detroit's historic Black newspaper. We'll be right back on The Metro. Stay with us.